Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Ahsoka Season 1, Episode 5, Shadow Warrior. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Ahsoka, so I have to start with the spoiler warning for Ahsoka up to Season 1, Episode 5. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So I thought this was another amazing episode. God, this show is just turning out to be so goddamn good. This is, I don't know, I can't say for certainty yet because there's still 3 episodes left, but this is going to be easily my favorite Star Wars show ever, or my favorite season of a Star Wars show ever. And that's including the animated stuff. Season 7 of Clone Wars is close, and Season 4 of Rebels also close, but if they hit the landing on this one, I think this one would be even better. Certainly better than live action Star Wars we got. Even with these just 5 episodes, just disregarding that we haven't had 3 episodes left, this easily blows away every season of The Mandalorian for me. And maybe that's just me and maybe other people, and to speak nothing of Andor or Book of Boba Fett. But maybe other people would feel differently, sure, but this is, yeah. So anyway, I love this episode, but in a very different way than I loved last week's episode. Last week's was more of an action adventure, and there was heart to it as well. And it blew me away immediately. Immediately as I was watching, I was like, wow, this is the best thing ever, so amazing. Whereas this week's episode, I didn't really know what to make of it at first. It didn't instantly blow me away or win me over. It was a thinker. It's something I actually went back and watched this episode again, and I watched certain scenes multiple times, and I'm not usually one to do that. Usually I only watch the episode once before reviewing it, because I had to have this episode sit with me for a bit, even though it was just a couple hours, but still I had to think about this one. And the more I think about it, and the more I watched it, the more I loved it, and the more I realized that this is also a masterpiece. Now, it is a very different type of episode last week, because last week was almost all action and suspense, where this one was almost all character story. Now, if you could describe the plot of what happens in this very briefly, because really, this episode does not do that much to push the plot forward. You could actually sum it up as Hera and her rebel allies look for Ahsoka, and with Jason's help, they find this Ahsoka, revive her, and they realize that Sabine had gone to another galaxy, and they try to figure out a way how to follow them, and Ahsoka comes up with the idea to go inside the whales, and she uses her force powers to make an alliance with the whales and hyperdrive away. That's basically the plot of the episode, but that misses so much nuance of the character story. Even the plot's very simplistic, and you can say the plot of last week's episode was kind of simplistic too, but it was more of the action and the character beats within those action beats that were done so goddamn well, that sold it. Where this week it was, of course, the main thing that sold this episode was the vision that Ahsoka had of Anakin. Now, some people may take issue with me describing it as a vision, because it kind of implies that it's, a dream or hallucinatory, which they weren't very clear that it was or was not. I mean, they did hint that it was not, that there was more to it because Jason could hear the lightsabers, and even her, if she listened very carefully, could also hear. So it implies that that's not simply a dream, although one could argue that Jason is listening into Ahsoka's, close to death vision or dream or whatever. But and then there's also, could it be the world between worlds, which it definitely resembles for certain, and maybe they're in the world between worlds, and Jason has this Force connection, who can sense that, and is sort of teaching her a lesson. I don't think that's ever going to be fully explained, and I don't think it should be. Now, some people were worried when they hinted at the world between worlds in last week's episode that it would lose casual fans who'd never seen Clone Wars and Rebels, and by jumping into that rabbit hole of what the world between worlds is, and the father and the brother and the sister and all that extended lore and stuff. And they were correct. Like, if they jumped headlong into all that stuff, they would have lost casual viewers. And I think that the way they handle it here, which can be open to interpretation in many different ways, and you don't have to be aware of what the world between worlds is in order to understand the purpose of the scenes with Anakin, because the purpose isn't, was it actually Anakin? Is this the Force ghost of Anakin, or is just the memory of Anakin that Ahsoka has? Is it just a version, that she conjured of him? I think all of those questions are unimportant. And I'm sure people will debate, and people probably argue with me and saying, oh no, it's very clear it's this way or the other. I don't really think any of that matters. I wouldn't care to debate anyone on that because I think it's irrelevant. The point is of what is actually quite beautiful, really. It almost brings me to tears. That it's basically Ahsoka coming to terms, like being at peace with Anakin and the fact that he was it was very metaphorical. It was in fact, very beautiful, and coming to terms that he was the one that trained her, and that she actually had a lot to learn from him. In fact, still does, which was the point of the episode where he kept saying, I have a lesson for you," and of course, the lesson was, do you want to live or die? And that's because of the situation she was in, where, she was near death, and it was just so powerful, and it sort of ties into what we've got in this show so far, particularly her relationship with Sabine. And I like how they touched on that when we go back to when we see Ahsoka as a youngling during the Clone Wars. And of course, a lot of people, especially fans of the Clone Wars, would have the huge nostalgia buttons hit big time. For me, I'm not as nostalgic for the Clone Wars because I just saw that last year, but still, I mean, it makes me nostalgic for like Attack of the Clones a little bit and all that, all that sort of thing. But so it wasn't the nostalgia. I didn't really care much about the nostalgia. I mean, it was cool, I will say that, but that's not why I love these scenes so much. It was the heart involved, and especially when they related to Ahsoka's character story. I think it really fleshes out her character, because a lot of people were complaining that they didn't really feel like the show was about Ahsoka, or that they didn't really get Ahsoka's character. And if they're complaining after this episode, then they just don't get it and are missing something, because this episode really, really, really makes it clear that this gets into her character. But anyway, the way that Anakin was saying, Or she told Anakin that, "Oh, is this all I have to teach my Padawan? War and destruction and death." And this gets back to sort of Balin, what he said, and that's probably why they put it in the previously on, where he told her that you're just like your master, all you know is destruction and death. And then so she's facing that head on, and she's saying, talking to Anakin, is this all there is? And he says, "Do you even want a Padawan?" Which again gets into her sort of rejecting Sabine and leaving her, and then not really wanting to train her and being very sort of coy about it, and sort of. And the point of it being that there is a lot more than just war, and she does have a lot more to teach than that. And then we get, and again, we get the nostalgia of the attack on Mandalore from season 7 of Clone Wars, which is one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars ever made. So it was cool to get that reference, and then it attacks, and then Ahsoka, when Anakin was saying that you're basically in a long line of Jedi, like you learned from me, and I learned from my master, and he learned from his master, and we all share this. It's like one with the Force sort of thing. But she was kind of rejecting of that, saying because part of her is scared of the fact that her master was the person who became Darth Vader, and which is a natural fear to have. And that's why and I think she does fear part of what she's capable of, and does wonder if all she knows is war and death and fighting. And I think that's what Balon touched on with her. And but when she brought this up, he sort of turned more into Darth Vader, because he was a representation of her fears, her biggest fears of her. And that, again, was a freaking amazing scene. At first, he was like the pre-suit Darth Vader from the end of the Revenge of the Sith, when he just had like the red eyes or whatever, and the red lightsaber, and that was fucking amazing. But then he would like blink a couple times and be the actual suit Darth Vader. Like, that was amazing, and it was not for nostalgia purposes, but kind of for partly, but mainly because, again, it's addressing her fears of becoming sort of evil, like the way her master did. And I think, though, that she understands Anakin, and as I said, it's a whole thing that she's become at peace with Anakin. She learns to appreciate him for who he was. And I'm sure Luke has told her the story about how he redeemed him right before his death. And I don't know if she knows that he's hanging around Luke as a Force ghost, though. But still, she must know, and maybe didn't want to admit, or doubted it, or didn't believe that there was good in him. But I think she really came to terms with that. But moreover, the point was, does she want to live? And I think it's sort of part of her doesn't, because she thinks that she does bring about death and destruction. That's the part of her that left Sabine, the part that doubts her. But I think she's faced those doubts and conquered them. And the moment where she says to him, I want to live, was powerful, was extremely powerful. Yeah, I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking of that. And of course, once she said that, once she came to terms with that, the Darth Vader Anakin vanished, and he came back to the peaceful Anakin that she knew. It's just so good. It's such a strong story. My God. Anyway, I really, really, really need to talk about the composer. I'm sorry, I can't recall his name at the moment. Apparently, the same person did the music for a lot of the animated shows, Rebels, and at least the last season of Clone Wars. And I think Bad Batch as well, if I'm not too mistaken. And the music was absolutely amazing in this episode. It's what really, really sold this episode. I watched several reviews so far that mention this, and it does deserve to be mentioned. Like, this is Star Wars music, like, at its best, like, since the freaking original trilogy. The music was just so powerful and really, really, really sold this episode. Particularly, like, I really got goosebumps when, again, this is a nostalgic callback, but when Jason was sort of hearing the waves and told Hera to listen, and then they played the classic Jedi music from the original trilogy. I was like, yeah, that gave me goosebumps. It was such a powerful use of music, but then they, it wasn't too nostalgia bait, because then they mixed it in with a more modern and newer music from there that was just, again, equally as powerful. It was so goddamn good. And then now this answers the question of why Hera was reckless and brought her son along with her on a dangerous mission, because he needed to be here for the plot in order to sense the Force, and so that he could sense that Ahsoka was there. But I love that moment. Like, that really, really reaches into that. And I hope they do have him become a Jedi. Kylo Ren's not going to kill him, though, so he can't train with Luke. But still, or he's not going to turn evil. But he does need to become a Jedi. Maybe he'll become one with Grogu. But I love how when Hu Yang is taking him on the ship, and he's like, oh, and he's talking about the training. He's like, oh, can I be trained? He's like, no. He's like, do you know how to make lightsabers? He's like, oh, yeah. Can you make one for me? No. Hu Yang is being kind of a dick to Jason. But anyway, he's really, really blunt. But then, Ahsoka uses the Force to sense what, read sort of the object and sense what happened to Sabine. And I like how I was worried that she would be upset or disappointed. Oh my God, Sabine did exactly what I told her not to, and gave in, but she didn't. Like, this is, and I don't think it's a coincidence that she was wearing white. When she came out of the ship, she was wearing all white. And some people actually, I had some reviews, even last week, were referring to her as Ahsoka the White, kind of referencing Lord of the Rings with Gandalf the White, that, after Gandalf died, he came back and was more powerful. And they're saying that this is something similar with Ahsoka, that she's now Ahsoka the White after coming back from death. But I don't think it's so much that she's more powerful. I mean, kind of goes hand in hand with it, but I think she's more at peace. She's more complete. Earlier in the episode, when she was talking to her, she even said, and she was talking to Hu Yang about how she's not really a Jedi, and she said to her that, oh, Anakin never completed my training. So kind of feeling like part of her feels incomplete, but I get the feeling that now she wouldn't say that. I think Anakin just completed her training, even if it was just a vision. But again, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Her training is now complete, and that and that she feels, this is kind of Ahsoka the White, that she feels she's more at peace, she's more complete, she's more a fully Jedi. And I think we get that in the following scene with the Pergols. Now, this is where the music comes in, because this was just so beautiful. Now, fans of Rebels, I'm sure, will appreciate this scene a lot more than those who haven't seen it. Seeing the Pergols like this, people were making a big deal just of their appearance in episode 3, but here, We get much more of them, much more close up, and we get that giant one with Ahsoka standing out of her ship, sort of using the Force to communicate with it. And I love, and this is what shows how that she's more at peace. The fact that Hu Yang's all freaking out, being like, "Oh, how do you know this will take us to where Ezra is and where Sabine is?" And she's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Oh, so we could go anywhere?" And she said, "Well, that's better than going nowhere." And she says this in a way that conveys that she's completely at peace with that. And I think she knows something, like she trusts the Force and knows that it will take her where she needs to go. And it's just so good. It's so good. Oh my god. And I suppose I could talk about the storyline with, the New Republic sending ships to take her back, and they're in trouble. It's not that I don't buy this, because the New Republic has been portrayed as kind of corrupt or dumb or not very functioning properly, so it makes sense in that lines, but it still seems really tropish to me. Oh, you disobeyed orders. It's like putting stakes in it just for the sake of having stakes. I don't know if I actually feel like I really need that storyline, but I don't hate it. Certainly doesn't affect my love for this episode in the least. So yeah, and then the beautiful music crescendos has Ahsoka flies inside the whale and Hypergon. This is not what I expected. A lot of people had theories that she would use the world between worlds to get to the other galaxy, and that's what I thought too. And I love how they subverted the expectation and being like, no, she's still here, stuck in this galaxy, but she uses the Pergols to get there. It's absolutely, amazing. I could just keep gushing about this episode even longer, but I think I hit all the major points. So my rating for The Shadow Warrior out of 10 is, of course, a 10, the best. Absolutely amazing episode. I think I need to watch it several more times. Brings me to tears. The character story was just simply amazing. And I think even Star Wars fans who've never seen Rebels or Clone Wars could still appreciate this episode. I really believe they could, because it was just so strong and so self-contained. I think you do need to be a Star Wars fan, though. If you've never seen the prequels, you'd be a bit lost. But I think that's really, it's just so good. And the music, I have to mention the music again, it's just amazing. Absolutely Star Wars music at its best. And again, this whole show has like such the strong Star Wars feel. It almost feels like, I know why some people are calling it Rebels Season 5, which I actually disagree, because it is different than Rebels, but it does feel like a kind of grand conclusion to Clone Wars and Rebels. It's just, without all the useless fluff, it's just the good stuff. Oh god, it's just, I did not expect this show to be this good. Anyway, that is it for my review of Ahsoka episode 5. I shall be back next week to cover episode 6. So be sure to check out my channel for that. Also check out my channels. I cover many other shows like Star Trek Lower Decks, and also covering Star Trek Next Generation every episode. And so be sure to check out that, and I cover many other shows as well, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.